right now, this is like a super hot topic. And I think that we can all learn from each other. So if you have something to add, if you've learned some tips and tricks that you want to share with others on how to help our home buyers get under contract, please feel free to share. You guys do this all day, every day. From my perspective, I'm always trying to structure the loan side of things so that we are making sure that we give our buyers every opportunity, discussing every idea to help them win the contract. And that's what it feels like right now. It's really it's not making an offer and an offer getting accepted. It's really winning the contract. And, from the sales side, I look at things just a little bit different, but for some of you guys, sales hasn't always been your background. And now we're really having to go into creative sales negotiation modes in a way that we haven't had to in the past. So Renee Harvey from Century 21 is on the call. She's been in the business for a long, long time. Several of you guys have been in the business 25, 30 years. And I think this is the strangest market that I've ever experienced. And I've been here for a long time. BJ's been in the market for, golly, 35, 40 years. And I'm pretty sure this is the weirdest market she's seen as well. I was talking to a builder yesterday and just giving you kind of an update on what the builders are seeing on their side. And then I am open to follow-up conversation. But his question to me is, when I thought that the supply and demand situation that we're in would improve. And I tossed that ball back to him and said, you're the builder. You guys are the ones that we are having to count on to help us catch up. So when do you think that we're going to have this supply and demand market right-sized a little bit? And so we talked through that. I'll give you my perspective and then I'll tell you what his answer was. So last year, of course, we had shortage of supplies because we had factories. We had parts of the world that were shut down. And so we had shortage of supplies. And then we had shortage of people because we had people sick or they were quarantined because others around them were sick. So we compound short supplies with short subs or manpower, and our builders started to get behind rather quickly. Rates dropped a lot. So all of a sudden there's a lot of movement going on in the market, and a lot of people that were on the fence are now off the fence. When you can get a 30-year loan at 2.5% interest, everybody was interested in doing something with their mortgage, whether it is sell their house and buy another one or refinance or improve where they're at. You guys saw it. Y'all were at Lowe's and Home Depot where the lines were down the aisles because people were just focused on their housing. And then, we go through the holidays, the first of the year, we're hoping that we might get a little bit of relief. And then we end up with a winter storm and a ship stuck in the canal where we couldn't get supplies again. I mean, it is just a compound of a compound of a compound. And now we have shortage of concrete on top of shortage of supplies. Well, of course, supplies short creates increase in price and rising rates. So now we still have a lot of catch up to do, but costs are going up pretty sharply. So now on top of shortage, we have a lot of emotions that are all over the board right now as we are all trying to figure out how to deal with the circumstances. Mortgage lending changed just a little bit in the last 12 months as well, making it a little bit harder to obtain financing, even with the lower interest rates, part of which is the self-employment. All of our poor self-employed buyers, they're really taking a hit, and it's still hard on them. So you even may have some sellers that are excited about selling, but they're self-employed, and then they find out it's not so easy for them to purchase right now. So there's just a lot of emotions going on. And those of us that it's felt by everybody everywhere. So I think that the more that we can talk about it, the more that we can discuss all of the challenges and help each other overcome, the better off we're going to be as an industry and helping to pull out of this crazy different time. So and then right now, these poor builders can't find lots in places to build on. And then what we are also dealing with right now is cities they don't have the manpower for the demand for permitting, for inspections. They don't have enough inspectors. And so the builders their challenge on the inspection side of things is it's taking so long, or they have newly hired inspectors they're having to deal with that don't know and understand the challenges of building to IBC codes. And so there's just a lot of challenges for the builders as the builders are trying to catch us up. There's supply shortage, there's sub shortage, there's shortages in the city municipalities and trying to get them into the building phases. And then the cost of the infrastructure has gone up too. So, and there's just not enough dirt. I mean, they can't find the tracts of lands that they need in order to develop. So I think it's really a 12 to 18 month period of time before we can count on the builders to get us caught up so that sellers can sell and have a place to move up to, so that we have pre-owned inventory loosened up again. So I think that this whole conversation about how to win the deal in a competitive market, we're going to deal with the competitive market for a while. I'm going to open it up to you guys because I'd really like to hear y'all's. That's just my opinion based on people that I've talked to. I'd love for somebody to tell me that this is that we're going to have a abundance of supply in the next 90 days. Does anybody have that information to share?
I wished I did, Michelle, but I don't.
Our manufactured home dealerships are trying to help out too, but again, we got to have land to put them on. And manufactured housing finance. I know that Guild's working with Clayton Homes and putting together some cool financing options, and I think we'll see more of that because we can factory build these houses faster than we can stick build them. It's still just a matter of land. And we did that class last week. So that might be a way for us to help get caught up.
Michelle,
Yeah.
The Outlook of Rural Land Markets that the Texas A&M Real Estate Center puts on each year was held virtually last week. Jim Gaines, the economist, at the very first of this session, talked about this exact thing. We talked about it in sales staff yesterday. The cost of materials is 300 times what it was in 19. They're not charting the numbers now based on 2020 because those don't mean anything. They're charting it against 19. So you can go on the Texas A&M Real Estate Center's website and look at the demographics and the charts that James Gaines, he goes by Jim.
James Gaines? Okay.
Gaines. And
Okay.
it's really, really good information. But his prediction is things are not going to lighten up, even maybe toward the end of the year, but probably not. And with the materials cost, we're not going to see much relief because the producers of those materials are not making the money. It's the finishing part of that are making all the money. And I'm not going to, we don't name names about that, but it's not the producer that has the running board feet of wood in the fields that they can't give it away. But the folks that are finishing those products is where the profits are
Being kept.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to join a call next week with Barry Habib,
mm-hmm.
who, for those of you guys who aren't aware, like he's really, I think, the leader in our industry as far as forecasting. And the CEO of Zillow, who tracks, Zillow spends so many dollars doing their research. And so I'll get a lot more insight as far as what to expect in the future in terms of dollars and percentages. So I'll report back to you guys what I learned from that. And for those of you guys who are interested, I can send you the link if y'all want to sign up for that as well. So does anybody have anything else they would like to add or comment on? All right. So what I have put together today is just what we're seeing on our side as a lender who just sees a lot of different transactions, and sharing that information with you guys. And again, feel free to speak up if you have anything to add or take away from what we're talking about today. I'm going to share the slides for a little bit, but I don't want to bore you with a PowerPoint presentation in the next 45 minutes. I really hope to wrap this up just a little bit early so that we can have some more conversation in regards to what we're talking about, because helping these buyers and sellers is just a super important part of what we do. I think I have everybody muted again. Yeah, okay. All right. Let me go into view mode.
Michelle, we have some others that are trying to get in, so there may be a little interruption.
Okay, all right.
To get them in.
So that other link is still popping it up somewhere, huh?
Yeah, I think it may be in an email reminder that's coming out. So I'll.
Okay.
I used the one that you texted me. Is that the right one?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. All right. BJ, I don't think you have meeting controls so you can mute people as they come in. And I thought that it was set that way, but apparently not. So I may have to hop back and forth. Well, let me see if I can give you those controls real quick. Because that would be helpful. Well, where are you? There you are. Let's see. I think I can. I think if I make you a host, I can still do what I need to do on my side. So, all right, let me go back to sharing. So, you know, each one of these transactions, each contract, well, for us, each pre-approval that we're presenting to a buyer, I'm always thinking, you know, really, number one, a good deal is a state of mind. So each one of these transactions, the buyer and the seller has to feel like they're getting a good deal. The offer being made to the seller, or in this case, you know, however, the terms of the contract, because it's not all about the numbers, the terms of the contract has to feel good to the seller, and the buyer has to feel like they're giving without giving up too much. Like everybody's got to win in the game whenever we're putting these contracts together, more so than ever. And so the expectations that we all, when we're working with the buyer, it's amazing to me how many people are not, I mean, they hear that the market is hot and we promote the house went under contract in 3 hours with 100 offers, whatever. They're hearing all of that information. But to a buyer who's never bought before and a seller who this is their first time to sell in a market like this, they don't know what those words mean. It doesn't translate to them how that means they have to present or think of how they're going to structure a contract or give you some input so you can structure a contract where the seller feels like they're really compelled to choose that offer over the other offers. A hot market to a buyer who doesn't, explain what hot market means and what those expectations should be based on what we're dealing with in this environment. It's much more of a conversation than saying, hey, listen, we've got till 6 o'clock Sunday night to put together our highest and best offer. Those are words to them that don't mean anything. And whenever you're thinking about the fact that it is important for the buyer and the seller to feel like they won, both of them have to win in their mind with a lot of give and take. So for us as a lender and for you guys as a real estate agent, it requires a lot more explanation as to what a hot market means. Why is it a hot market? The things that we just talked about a few minutes ago needs to be expressed to the buyers and the sellers so they understand the environment that we're all in right now. And the expectations, it really requires a conversation that we're all having together where we're educating our buyers and sellers on what we're dealing with. For me as a lender, when I have a conversation with the buyer and I know that I'm working with a realtor who's also taking the time to explain what we're dealing with, then that two-way tag team conversation makes the whole entire, it makes the conversation easier for me because I know they've already heard it from you. They may have heard it worded a little bit differently, but they are still are hearing what hot market really means and what does highest and best really mean. So, discussing the availability of homes and why there's a shortage of inventory, how long we expect this shortage of inventory, what types of homes, what neighborhoods, what price ranges more short than others. All of that matters. And then knowing and understanding how the financing terms could be interpreted by the seller matters a lot. And it's still part of that conversation. For them to understand the average days on market. I would love for someone to unmute themselves and just tell me, based on a 250 and under price range, what is the average day on market for your area?
3 days.
It's crazy. But knowing and understanding what that means from a buyer that may have bought a house before, but it was probably so long ago and it's different now. And so having that conversation is more important than ever right now. And then the things that we try to do on the buyer side to make sure that our people have a competitive edge. And what really matters on y'all's side, whenever you are looking at a pre-approval letter, if you're on the buyer side, or you're looking at a pre-approval letter on the seller side, determines a lot about whether or not, at the end of the day, the goal for us as the facilitator of a transaction, and I say us as in you guys and anybody that's providing the financing, the title company, everybody's goal at the end of the day is to get that loan to the closing table based on the contractual agreement on time, smoothly. And that takes so much more than it ever has. So that competitive edge that people have, cash is a competitive edge, right? And so if I were representing a buyer and my buyer didn't have the ability to pay cash, then I've got to be thinking, okay, what can I put in that offer to compete with a cash offer? Because you got to know what your competition is before you know how you're going to win against your competitor. And your competitor right now is so, So for example, if you were looking at presenting an offer and you know you're going to be against cash, so what are some of the other seller needs that would help you get a competitive edge when presenting that offer? So some of the things that are in, Renee, since either one of you, either Renee, how many different points in the contract is a point of negotiation?
Possession.
You've got 32.
There's 32. I was going to guess somewhere around there. So there are so many different ways just to structure a contract where the buyer and the seller feel like they won. Number of days for closing. So many times people assume that the seller wants to close as quickly as possible. The seller may or may not have figured out where they want to live or where they're going to live once they sell the house. Right now, we have a lot of sellers that are possibly looking at, I just did something I didn't mean to do. You've got some sellers that are moving or have their house on the market because they have to. BJ, would you go in and mute? There's several people that need to be muted. So occupancy, closing dates. Those are two biggies because the assumption it shouldn't always be that they want a quick closing or that they can get out immediately. So a lot of times a cash offer is a lowball offer with a quick close. So how do you compete against that? Know and understand what the seller needs are and structure a contract that is based on the seller needs. Maybe the seller needs 5 days to get out of the house because they don't know for sure where they're going. We've got a lot of sellers right now that are taking advantage of the fact that they can make a ton of money on their house, pay off all of their debt, and get themselves in a good financial position so they can buy in the future. They aren't necessarily exiting and buying immediately. Sell high, buy low. There are a lot of sellers that are thinking that right now. And so we also, you guys keep in mind too, you've got some people that may be choosing to sell here in the next 30 to 90 days because they haven't made a house payment in the last 12 months because they filed forbearance. And this is their one opportunity. I mean, a year ago when they didn't make their house payment, do you think that they were thinking that they would be able to sell their house, pay all of the 12-month house payments they've skipped, and still put money in their pocket and pay off debt? So there's some people that are some sellers that are just taking advantage of that opportunity. But you and me, working with our buyers, need to know and understand the seller situation enough or not assume that a quick close and immediate occupancy is what the seller wants or needs, because it may not be. So the pre-approved financing. So you guys, for those of you guys who need to be reminded, a pre-qualification is not worth the paper it's written on. A pre-approval is actually the loan being processed, the application thoroughly processed, and it is just one step away from having an underwriter approve that loan. It's pre-approved. It is a fully processed application.
I tell people it's basically a credit card to go buy a house on, and that's where you've got to be at to jump ahead of some other people. We don't have time to almost, or we think we might, or don't have my paperwork in. That's nothing to these sellers.
No, don't even. Yeah, I mean, it's your business as to whether or not you are going to show them a house without a pre-approval. And that's you make that decision on how you run your business. But don't make an offer without a thorough pre-approval letter, because you're competing with how many offers? And as a seller's agent, most of these seller agents are calling and confirming this information. They're not just assuming that the letter that they're looking at is a legit letter and that everything's been reviewed. So we're getting a lot of phone calls. I prefer to pick up the phone and call the seller's agent myself as a lender, but a pre-approval letter is just one step away from underwriting approval. And that's a must, especially in this market. Now, one step ahead of that, and a lot of lenders are starting to do fully underwritten loans before they have buyers out house hunting. And if that's the case, then there are lenders out there that do the credit approval guarantees, or so if it's underwritten, it's going to close, which gives you one more step above in the competitive edge. When you can tell a seller's agent that, hey, this loan has already been totally through underwriting and we can close quickly. All we need is the appraisal, the title work, blah, blah, blah. You may not even need an appraisal right now. That gets you that much closer to a cash offer. So if you tweak that contract based on seller needs and you have an underwritten loan so that you are that much closer to a cash offer, it's going to help you get that competitive edge to win that deal. Option fee. Are you guys starting to see an increase in the option fees?
Yes, ma'am. I've got agents here in the Salina office that are finding that they're having to write the option fee for 1% of the contract price.
So are we. Earnest money that can go back. As far as being a competitive offer, being able to write that option fee check for at least 1% gets the attention of the seller and the seller's agent. And we're starting to see that a lot. I am not a big fan of buying a house sight unseen without an inspection. I'm not telling you guys how to do your business, but the shorter time period that you can give in that option period with a larger option fee is another competitive edge. And it also shows that the buyer has the ability to write the checks right now. You're not waiting on a 401k. You're not waiting on a sale of a house. You're not limited on funds. You have the ability to write the check at that time. Of course, seller concessions. I haven't seen any contract be accepted with the seller concessions or the contingency of sale of a home in the last couple of months. So from a competitive standpoint, that's a really, really hard sell. There are some bridge loan products out there. If you've got a seller that has to sell, they need the funds from their home first before they have the ability to write a check for the down payment. Then there are some products out there for that. Then once they sell their house, they can do a large principal reduction and then adjust their payment with the recast. A lot of lenders have that ability to recast that loan. We're also seeing a lot of folks that are buying a house with the minimum down payment. As long as I qualify for both payments and then doing a recast once they sell their home, because contingencies are just not being accepted. Again, you've got the 3 different levels. Please, please, please educate your buyers, educate your sellers about the difference in a pre-qualification and pre-approval. So whenever you're looking at those offers, or you look as a seller's agent, or you're presenting or putting together a contract as a buyer's agent, anything less than a pre-approval letter is it's just, you just don't have a competitive edge. The pre-qualification, and you need to ask the lender questions. A pre-qualification to most lenders in the industry is just a glance at the application and credit report. It does not require paperwork. Your question to the lender is, have you reviewed their income and asset documentation? And have you ran it through all of the analysis and calculators and worksheets and everything that needs, that is required by the loan program? And have you ran it through the automated system to make sure that you have a loan approval? Those are the questions that you should be asking so that you know if you are using the word pre-qualification or pre-approval correctly. It's really just about the lender's definition, but most of the time pre-approval is the same. It's processing the loan up to underwriting approval. And then a lot of lenders, I know that Guild has the credit approval protection. If you can present to a seller, not only are my people already ready to go, they basically have a blank check with this credit protection approval from the lender up to this amount. We're good to go. And there's even a guarantee that backs it. We're seeing a lot more lenders provide that. Again, you know, whenever you're walking through the home, if you walk through the home and you listen to the conversation that your seller's agent is having before you structure this contract, assuming that you can get the agent to pick up the phone and not just text you back, finding out what the seller needs helps you structure that loan where the buyer and the seller feel like they win. And so asking those questions specifically helps considerably put you in a competitive, gives you a competitive edge. Again, remembering that there's 32 different points in a contract in which you could fill out the contract based on the buyer and the seller both winning or giving and taking enough that someone feels like they won. So just knowing and understanding what is important to all parties involved in that transaction is just super important. And it just requires a lot of paying attention, asking questions, and listening to answers. Does anybody have any good strategies that they can share with others in terms of just listening and understanding? Okay, why in the heck is that doing that? Nobody wants to share their trade secrets? Okay. So then once you put together that offer, I highly encourage you guys to write a summary highlighting some of the things in that contract or in the pre-approval letter that highlights your competitive edge. Notice that we put 5 days for occupancy or for possession of the home. Or notice that we put X number of dollars in the option period and we only need 4 days for the inspection because I have an inspector lined up ready to go. Notice that we don't have a financing contingency, or point out the things in a cover letter that you feel gives you the competitive edge with that offer that you just presented. That cover letter, don't assume that they're going to notice some of those things that you did strategically to give you a competitive edge. Point it out in a cover letter. This is a lender that I've worked with for several years. Please feel free to pick up the phone and have a conversation. They communicate well. They always close on time. If there's any challenges, they're really good at solving them or figuring them out. Notice that we are willing to pay X number of dollars over the appraised value up to blah, blah, blah. All of those things that you put in the contract to give you a competitive edge, note it in there. My buyer has the ability, and I've already spoken to the lender, you're welcome to verify that they have the funds available to pay X number of dollars over the appraised value not to exceed blah, 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 based on the contract that was written. Put that in the cover letter so they know that you are good to go. Your buyer's good to go. And this loan is going to close, or this transaction is going to close with everybody working together, communicating well to overcome any kind of challenges. Because anybody that's selling houses right now knows that there is going to be a challenge at some point in the transaction. But when everybody works together and everybody is talking every step of the way, we just work through them. That's what we do. We problem solve. And if this was easy, everybody'd be doing it. So putting all of that information is super important so that because a lot of time, even if you had this conversation with the other agent, it's just good to have it also in writing as a backup. Renee, I don't know how many other brokers, Renee Harvey, I don't know if we have any other brokers on the call, but I can see your face. So I'm just going to ask you, as a broker, is there anything wrong with doing a cover letter, or there's some things that you should make sure you don't put on that cover letter?
Well, what our real estate coach has instructed us to do as far as a letter to the seller is to leave out the emotional tugs of the heart, because they really don't mean anything.
Right.
But as far as pointing out the positive aspects of the offer, that's fine, as long as you just keep it to a bare minimum.
Yeah.
Keep the business bullet points. But what we're seeing in our market is we're not getting the opportunity sometimes to even have an offer submitted. For example, you have a showing scheduled at 2:00 this afternoon, and at 12:30, you get a call from the listing agent to say the seller accepted another offer. Or I'm sorry, the property contractor, the seller accepted the offer. They're not waiting for that showing.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if they're being instructed by their brokers to do that, which is what I suspect. Or so the question is, how do you send that message without being I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, accusatory, because in our opinion, that's not working for your seller. If you don't even wait for a showing for another hour to see what comes in, it's just real hard for me to justify how that's representing a seller, even though we're not representing a seller, we're representing a buyer.
Right.
But that's extremely frustrating in the market right now. Also, we're seeing offers that come in as cash, but through the option period and through the negotiation of repairs, it goes back to third-party financing.
Yep. I have heard that I have talked to buyers who wanted to use that strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not okay with that because that's not ethical. There is the option of, just so you guys are aware, you as a buyer, there's what Fannie Mae calls delayed financing, where in a market like this, if you have the ability to pay cash, but you really want to borrow the money for the tax reasons or, for whatever, if you have the money, it doesn't mean that it's the smartest thing for you to do, to tie up your cash, especially where money's making money right now. However, to offer and be competitive, we've got several buyers that are paying cash. Like they made an offer, they're paying cash. However, I have already processed their loan to do a delayed financing, which is basically a refinance once they own the home, and will give them their money back. So they're making a cash offer, they're closing cash. They're not doing the unethical switch it up after the fact. They're literally closing cash. And then I'm just doing a finance after the loan after their transaction is closed. The reason that requires a separate loan program is because typically Fannie Mae would say, once you own a home, before you can refinance, you have to be on title for X number of months. And Fannie and Freddie, FHA, VA, they all have their different title seasoning. But this is an exception to the rule, especially in a competitive market where the buyers are having to pay cash and they don't want to, they're having to in order to get the house. and then we'll just turn around and refinance them.
Michelle, this is Louise Taylor.
Yes, ma'am.
In refinancing, going ahead and closing and then refinancing, shortly after that, what does that do to the tax consequences of not being able to write off that interest?
You're still, I mean, whenever the mortgage loan is put in place, then they'll have that interest to write off again.
Okay.
Yeah. Now there are 2 closings. So the downside to that, and that is the one thing that we are making sure that they're fully aware whenever they choose this, is that the seller provided a title policy. Possibly they may have paid for their own title policy on the cash offer, which is another point of negotiation, is for the buyer to pay the title policy. I know that you guys are seeing that as well, but Texas is a renew and extend state. So guess what? They're going to have to purchase again whenever they do that refinance to get their money back. They'll have to pay for that title policy again. It'll be at a discount, but it's a 60% discount. They're still paying 40% of what they just paid for title policy if they paid for their own title policy on a cash offer. But they still, that's why we're having that conversation up front, so that they know and understand what the costs are for paying cash to get the house and then refinancing it for the cash back. So that's a strategy that we're seeing for those that are paying cash on the transactions themselves. But Renee, there's just, the frustrating part is some people, whenever they are playing the game and they're super competitive, they don't play by the rules. And we're seeing a lot of that.
Well, you're right. We are seeing a lot of it. We're seeing a lot of shoddy offers. And there's going to come a point, if this continues, that, because I have brokers in the Bryan College Station area, some in Midland, some in El Paso, it's happening everywhere. They are sending, I'm not proposing this, but I'm just saying because they run into this as well. They are sending the offer to the seller with a note that says, please contact your listing agent to discuss this offer, because it's rampant. I think it's going to take some consumer complaints filed, because it's more than a commission issue. It's not about that at all. You don't get to that point. Sometimes you're not even notified that they accepted an offer, and then you wasted your time showing.
Well, so what is the timing once they've accepted an offer that they have to update the system as pending?
3 days. But I mean, in 3 days, a lot of things can happen.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So I think it's going to take a push from a consumer complaint to be a wake up call. I don't know what else to do about that. I mean,
I don't either. And it would be different if this was going away in 3 to 6 months. It's not. So coming up with some, and I'll be paying attention. I'll be listening. I'll be reaching out. I'll be joining seminars and conferences and coming up with other ways, just like you guys are, on how do we continue to win at the game, knowing that the rules of the game have totally changed and are still changing as people get, they bend the rules as we go. So, but, at the end of the day, as frustrating as it is for everybody, the best thing we can do is keep it professional, keep our composure. The emotions, like I said, of everybody involved in a transaction can just get totally out of hand, because if one deal falls apart for a buyer, they're knowing that they've got to go through that whole process all over again and do offer after offer after offer. I mean, it is maintaining emotions right now is going to be something we're all going to have to really work hard on, because it is, we've got a lot coming at us. On top of the fact that we are starting to see, once we get into the transaction and we get an appraisal back, and now we got to deal with the gap in the appraisal. There's some strategies that we're working on in regards to that. One thing that we are looking at is, even though you have someone that qualifies to buy a home without a grant or a down payment assistance, we have so many first-time home buyers that don't have a shot or a chance unless they have money available to them for the appraisal gap, because that is the price range that is so hot that people are, I mean, you've got investors playing in that same arena with cash. So we're trying to be really strategic on how we can help them, how we can help some of these buyers that deserve houses that really don't have a big bank account to help them buy these houses. You know, what programs can we put them on to help cover the gap when they have their own down payment, they have their own closing costs, they can cover all of that, but you know, and I know that the house may not appraise. So any of that information that you guys can tell us up front, hey, listen, we had to pay $175 for this house, or we had to pay $225 for this house, and I really don't think it's going to appraise for more than $200. We need to be on the front end coming up with those scenarios and making sure that the buyer is going to still be okay, so that we don't have a contract that terminates later and you got to go back out there and try to find them another house. So the more information that you guys can give us up front, the better we can prepare the buyer, and we can have some scenarios put together. And right now, I'm not just okay with the plan A and B. I think we have to have a plan A, B, C, and D, and be ready to execute on any of those, which just requires a lot of communication between us and you guys.
She's doing her Wednesday stuff again.
Whoever's talking, you guys need to mute yourself. We're going to know your business. So now I don't know how you guys feel in getting into the houses to do a home inspection prior to the offer deadlines. That was something that we were seeing up front. So, people were paying the money to go ahead and do inspections ahead of time. They look at the house and they get an inspection done. Number one, you got to have a seller willing to allow you to do that. Number two, there's got to be enough time, and there's not really enough time. Waiving the home inspection is an option. It's your business, not mine. If a buyer were to ask me if I would personally buy a house without getting an inspection, my answer would be if I had a bank account big enough that I could pay for any repairs if they came up after the fact. That's not a blanket answer. It's an individual answer based on different situations. I, as a buyer, would go in and possibly buy a house without an inspection, but I've bought and sold 50 houses before, and my husband's capable of fixing anything. So, my answer for myself personally is not the same. And you just have to know your buyer and the buyer situation before you can give them the pros and cons and help them make a decision, or let them make a decision based on your expert opinion.
And get it in writing. Once they made that decision, get it in writing that was their decision to protect everybody.
And if I'm part of that transaction, I would also like to know that they waived their rights to the inspection, or they decided not to get an inspection, because when they call me 8 weeks later after they buy the house, I want to have it in writing too, that you guys discussed it and they decided to not get a home inspection. Because if you guys have sold houses for any amount of period of time, they want somebody to blame if that happens. So just be extra careful about that. I'm seeing a lot of extended occupancy, like we talked about before, without charging the seller for that. The one thing that I'll tell you about that, and it really needs to be addressed as well, is remember, once a buyer takes ownership of a property, Their homeowner's insurance is based on them occupying the property. So let's just say that you've got a seller that took, you closed on a transaction 2 days ago, and the seller's still in the home, but the homeowner, the new owner's home insurance is in effect. And now we have a storm that blows through and you've got water in the house. And the insurance company finds out that the buyer, the homeowner, is not occupying that property. It could be an insurance claim problem. So your insurance agent needs to be aware of the arrangement made, or the buyer's insurance agent needs to be aware of the arrangement made for the seller to stay in the house for X number of days, because number one, the seller's contents are not covered under your homeowner's insurance. Number two, they may fight you on a claim if you're not occupying that property yourself. So don't assume that it's okay to put it in the contract that way without making sure that whoever's insuring that property is okay with that as well.
Well, they may find themselves completely uncoverable.
Exactly.
Because they didn't give the insurance company the notice before it happened.
Exactly. So if you're going to allow the seller in the house for X number of days, the buyer needs to have a conversation with the insurance agent to make them aware and make sure they have coverage during that period of time. Does anybody have any questions or anything to add to that, or experience that they've had previously over that? Okay. The other thing that you are seeing a lot of, someone needs to be muted, BJ, appraisal contingencies. On a conventional loan, it is very possible that we will not have to have an appraisal for the on the property. The buyer elects whether or not they still want an appraisal done when we have the opportunity to waive the full appraisal. So that's something that we'll discuss with a buyer, and but it is best if you guys already have somewhat of an idea how much over what you think the house will appraise for that they are agreeing to pay to. And just know that we'll probably see fewer property inspection waivers, which is a waiver for the full appraisal, as we go, because the prices continue to rise faster than what the database for Fannie and Freddie with their AVM is showing those values to be. So you might see fewer and fewer of those property inspection waivers. However, we are also trying to find out how to beta test where we can pull from Fannie or Freddie's database to see what they're showing the value to be based on that database, so that we can have those conversations ahead of time too. Hey, it looks like you're paying, more than what the X number of dollars over what Fannie thinks that the value is. So we have to have an appraisal, but we can go ahead and have a contingency plan in regards to that gap. So some of the gaps that you guys that we're having to exercise is also just looking to see where they have some funds available they didn't want to use but could if they had to, and having that conversation. Some other things that we're having to do, there's a lot of folks that were hoping to put 20% down. The contract's written with 20% down, the value comes in low, so their down payment based on the new appraised value does not give them their 20% equity to avoid PMI. So we're having to get creative and finding different ways to utilize upfront MI and some other loan structures. So those are some of the conversations that your lender should be having with the buyer in regards to that. And just knowing that if you can relay the information to the seller that you have discussed all of your plans A, B, C, and D, so that you're prepared to make sure that this transaction does go to the closing table with great communication every step of the way. Those are the things, and just doing a really good cover letter to point out all of those competitive edge bullet points that you have put into that contract and have thought through on your strategy for that offer. And then there's some other contingent or other programs that are available through several lenders. One that Guild has available where people can go ahead and lock in the rate now with this rising rate market that we're in, so that you don't have to worry about the buyer backing out because the rate's a little bit higher than what they had planned on it. Again, that's another bullet point. If you utilized that program to put on there, hey, my buyer's already even locked in the interest rate before this offer was even made. So we don't have any buyers freaking out over rising rates. And then the bridge loans, there are some bridge loans available in this area, but they're not, Texas is real funky because of our Texas laws. So we don't see them in Texas as much as you do in some of the other states. And then there's some other programs out there that I know that you guys have seen, and I don't have the company names, where if you do have someone that does have to sell their house, there are investors that will buy those houses and then turn around and resell. I know you guys know who those are as a contingency plan, but of course it can't be a contingency on that contract if you're in a competitive situation. So it needs to be something that's addressed up front, not something that's done after the fact. That's not one of those, hey, I'm going to go buy a house this weekend. I haven't even applied for a loan yet. That's not one of those conversations. Just so you guys know, you can expect it to take, people are going to, when they apply for a loan, it doesn't matter where they're applying, they're going to have to provide paperwork and allow enough time for that paperwork to get processed. A pre-approved loan is an actual processed application with all of the documentation. It is not a willy-nilly 15-minute little letter that we spit out so you can go make an offer on a house. It doesn't work that way. If someone gives somebody a willy-nilly little 15-minute pre-approval letter, it's not a pre-approved loan. It's just a letter. It's just a piece of paper, and it's nothing more than a pre-qualification disguised as a pre-approval. Those take time, so give everybody heads up. We have 2 minutes left, but I am also on the call for as long as you guys need me if you have any questions or anything to add. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So what is your opinion for FHA buyers rolling over to conventional financing? And how do you make an FHA buyer that can only go FHA win? Because based on the appraisal issue.
Well, and
Based
that's
solely
just
on the
it.
appraisal issue.
So I would speak specifically to the seller. So when I just that sales side of me, and I just grew up in that sales environment, I'm always thinking about what could I say to the other party to make them feel good about making the decision that I want them to make. Call it manipulation. My parents always said that I was always that was manipulation. To me, it's just sales.
You're a master motivator.
Yeah, whatever. So so I always want to know, what is the concern? What concern do you have whether or not my check still says Guild Mortgage, regardless of what the loan program is? And no matter what loan program we have a buyer on, the check's going to cash the same. So if their concern is the appraisal, then I think you have to speak specifically to the appraisal. Right now, if their concern is that I'm going to order an appraisal and it's going to have a case number assigned to that property for that appraisal, and now you're stuck with that appraised value. And then the buyer cancels, and now you have this appraisal hanging out there. So your next offer can't be an FHA offer. Is that the concern?
Well, that's one concern on the seller side. My question comes from, if I have a buyer and the only way they can get a loan is FHA, what could be a strategy that I could help educate the listing agent that says, if it doesn't appraise, how do we help that buyer still be able to buy under FHA if we've got a gap in what they, list for? I know FHA's guidelines are it saves them from overbuying a property,
if they choose to.
Right.
So what I have seen the contracts written, and I can't tell you exactly how they state it, but you also need to check with the broker anyway and not take what I have an example of. We have had several FHA contracts written where it specifically says in the contract that though you're going to have the amendatory clause that says the buyer doesn't have to pay over appraised value, they are willing to pay X number of dollars over appraised value, and the funds have been verified by the lender.
Okay, now here's my question. What if, I guess the buyer is just not able to come up with the difference? Is there anything that Guild has in their toolbox that can help them bridge that gap if they still want the house?
We are utilizing, like, you've got your Seth Gold Star. It's not anybody's favorite program because the rates are so much higher, but it gives you up to 9% of the loan amount.
Well, see,
And that's plenty.
and they can refinance in 24 months.
Yeah, I have to pull those guidelines
Well, I mean,
again because it's been
you
a
know,
long time, but
guesstimate
yeah,
20 about at
exactly.
least 24 months. So how bad do they want? And then you just, that's it. That's information. And then you just say, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
You know, here's the gap money. Here's what it's going to cost you. Do you still want to continue as an FHA borrower, or do you want to sit this one out?
Right. And those are the conversations that I think are super important that the buyer and the lender has to have up front. We have to know, what do you think? As a realtor, I want to know from you, what do you think our gap is going to be? So we have our contingency plan, and then you can structure the contract based on, listen, we are prepared to pay blah, blah, blah. And we already have the funds available for that in the event that we have to do that.
Well, it's like the attorney always says, I don't want any surprises when we get out in the courtroom. So have that frank discussion with the lender. I think if we can support that to our client, because it doesn't do anybody any good and it hurts them if they're not square with y'all.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why I think, and I can't stress the communication. You guys have got to be able to, whoever your favorite loan officer is, pick up the phone and have these conversations, because the only way to have a competitive edge is for everybody to be playing on the team together. We don't win when we're all playing our own game by our own rules. So we have to figure out what does the seller need to feel like they won, and can I give that to them? And if so, how am I going to give that to them? And then you got to communicate that information clearly to the seller in the event that you get that opportunity. I know as well as you guys do that there are a lot of people out there not playing fair, that aren't taking the emails. They're not acknowledging receipt of the documentation. They're not picking up the phone. It's a text conversation. It's tough, but still, the more that you do, doing your job as the buyer's agent to put it all together and provide that and show proof that you did, you're doing your job. You can't help it that someone else isn't doing theirs or playing fair. So, did everybody get something out of today's class? Was it worth your time?
Always.
Good.
Thank you, Renee Harvey, for your input. It's invaluable.
Yes.
So,
yes. I love it whenever there's a mixture of experience and a mixture of location, so that, because it's, there's not a one size fits all transaction ever.
well, I think what this market is going to shake out is it's going to shake out the cream of the realtors and the cream of the lenders.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to be left.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to shake it out. Right now it's, the little bit of the wild west. And, it's just hold tight, band together, talk. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? What are you seeing? And now we're starting to see up here I've had some agents that are actually putting people into leases, and
Mhm,
now the leases are going to best to highest. And
mhm.
some of the buyers to get into to be tenants to win the lease, they're having to pay 6 months up front on a $3,000 rental
Yeah.
to win it because
Yeah.
there's just up here, there's just nothing.
Well, and so from a company initiative standpoint, what Guild's looking at, we're working closely with Clayton Homes, and we've got a couple of cities, and I've talked to Barry Horn, one of our, I'm not a titles person, so I can't even tell you what his title is. Heck, half the time I don't know what mine is, but about trying to get some large tracts of land developed out for these cross mods. I don't know if you guys have seen the cross mods. They look more like a stick built house than any factory built home that I've ever seen. So look it up, Clayton Homes cross mods. But what we are seeing is neighborhoods being developed with cross mods, because you can get a neighborhood put together pretty quickly, and it's a lot more affordable because it's built in a factory. You're not worried about weather. The floor plan, there's a dozen floor plans, but the materials are ordered in advance. I mean, there's just the efficiency that then rolls down to affordability for the consumers. And so we as a company are working closely with Clayton Homes to try to help the affordability issues that we are seeing across the country using the factory built homes. So I think you'll see more and more of that as well. It's not an immediate fix, but I think you'll see that a lot in the next 6 to 9, 12 months, because it doesn't take long to establish that. So
Can I add something?
please.
I was showing over the weekend, and those cross mod homes that were built by Clayton in Princeton were running almost the same price per square foot as anything else in the neighborhood. And they are all under contract. The only ones that we were able to even look for availability on were the ones where the loans were falling through. And there were only 2 out of about 40. So even those homes that are showing up on the market are already under contract and gone. It's just, and the prices have skyrocketed.
Yeah.
My folks were moving from Virginia, and they thought they were going to be able to get something a little more affordable because they were willing to accept that type of home. And that type of home has even done exactly what our stick built homes have done.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope there are more of them, because they were
Well,
not.
and I think that's where it starts helping, is when there's enough of them that the demand isn't so high.
Yes, but the demand was high for those as
I
well.
know.
So it's just shocking.
But part of that is because there's not land to put them on.
Mhm.
So, the Clayton Homes is producing them, but you got to have them somewhere set up with the infrastructure.
Do you know where Clayton is building more of those?
No,
In your
but
discussions with them?
No, but I had a call with our guy that's over that the other day, and I'll circle back around to him. We got disconnected, and I just hadn't circled back around to him, but I will.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep. So any of those struggles or needs that you guys see, if you see something that somebody else is doing and you want to know if there's something else on the horizon with other lenders, just bring it to my attention, because I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on and what I can do to help bring more to the area to relieve the pressure. So
I was curious, Michelle, like for all the agents on here, as far as the appraisal gap goes, kind of what everyone is seeing on that, like how big of a gap are you seeing? Or because I know, like I showed a house a while back, and I was concerned about that, and then it ended up going for asking price, and I still, I haven't heard about the appraisal. But I mean, that's a big struggle, and it is hard to explain to a client that, either you're going to be responsible for it or you're going to have to split the difference. So I kind of wanted to hear some feedback on like what everybody's seeing dollar wise on that. And then also if sellers are willing to kind of bridge that gap with buyers.
I personally have not seen sellers willing to bridge that gap. They, the frustration for us as an advocate for the buyer, I guess, I mean, that's not our formal role. Our formal role is to facilitate the transaction, but as an advocate for the buyer, the frustration has been that the seller thinks, well, I mean, and the seller's mostly right. I'll just stick it back on the market. I can get more for it now than I could 3 weeks ago. So them splitting the difference is been a lot more difficult than it had in the past. We would, see everybody give a, do a little give and take. I also have been really shocked at some of the houses appraise for the sales price when nobody expected it to. And then sometimes just the opposite happens. So I haven't seen a pattern. Has anybody seen a pattern where they can assume, Renee?
So in Salina Prosper, we've had about 20 to 25 homes close in the last 30 days, and they're averaging $50,000 to $100,000 over list price, and they're appraising for it. But Melissa and Anna on some of those homes that are going for about 10 to 25,000 more in asking price than list price, they're falling apart and either getting re-put back together, or a compromise, like Caitlin was saying, was, okay, now that we're in reality, now what do we do? So we're seeing, Frisco, Salina, Prosper, all of those are supporting those prices. But every agent here takes it at the worst case scenario that it could appraise at. And then they're going back and making sure that through the buyer's agent that they show proof of funds, that they've got that gap in cash, or an extra loan, a second mortgage situation that would be coming in, so that they know that it's not gonna, fall apart at the very end. But yeah.
Because I think to Renee's point, it's surprised me how many buyers think, oh, well, yeah, we'll pay $20,000 more than what the seller is wanting to get the deal, not realizing that they literally have to write a check for the difference if it doesn't appraise. Their assumption is, but heck, buyers still sometimes have the assumption they can roll in closing costs. So it's just they don't do this all day, every day. There's a lot of misunderstandings in regards to how that works. So that's why that conversation is super important. And Caitlin, there is not a rule book, and there's not a standard. I'm not seeing enough. I'm always looking for patterns, because if I can find a pattern, I can predict. And if I can predict, then I can preempt a lot of problems. I'm not seeing a pattern.
Yeah. And the thing too, you have to think about is, if you do pay 50,000 over, what it appraises at, like, is it gonna, still increase in its value and build equity? It's just, there's so many, I guess.
Yeah. What happens?
That's just part of the market,
It is right.
What happens? Yeah. If they have an emergency.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's why, I mean, we're just in uncharted waters is all I can say.
Yeah. New territory.
Yep, for sure. I want to make sure I've addressed all of the other questions, and I think we have in the chat. Oh, I love that, Beverly. You chatted that to everyone. As a listing agent, Beverly has made a list of favorable terms particular to her seller and added that document to the MLS to help the buyer's agent prepare their offer. I love that clear communication. Yes. Okay, I think that covers up. That's a great idea. I'm just a big transparency person. If you can just tell everybody what it takes to feel like everybody wins, let's just lay it all out there. I think that's it. Okay, I've covered it all. Well, BJ will follow up with any supporting documentation. I can't think right now what that might be. Yes, I am. BJ, I'll get with you on that if you're not sure. But if you guys need anything, just feel free to reach out. If anybody wants to sit down and do a one-on-one session, I really like hearing what it is about the business you love, where your struggles are, and kind of talking through some of your struggles and maybe come up with some ideas to help you. That's one of my favorite things to do. So I have a link to my calendar, not to be informal, but that way we're not going back and forth. When are you available? I don't know. When are you available? It's just easy. You just go to the link and book yourself on my calendar and we'll get together. So whatever it is that we can do for you guys to be a resource. As a lender, I have a team that does an amazing job taking care of your clients. We've got a lot of loan officers in our building. We're all here to care and serve for you and your clients. So you just tell us what it is that you need from us to help you win. Oh, y'all stay dry and safe.
Michelle,
Yes.
Thank you.
to tell everyone that if you did not sign up on Eventbrite and you want CE credit, just email me at bkirkpatrick@guildmortgage.net so I can be sure and give you credits. If you signed up on Eventbrite, I've got it already.
The beauty of Eventbrite is that it's streamlined. And you'll get the reminders of the remaining classes. I can't remember what our next class is. We only have 2 left in this series, and then we will not have classes weekly. We'll have them just monthly. But if you have an office and you want to get people together and for me to come into your office to do some training, I've got an entire library full of classes and I'm always adding classes every month. Go to michellecastle.info and you'll see all of the courses that I have available if you want to schedule something individually on your own or with your own team.
Michelle, what was the name of the houses that Clayton is doing?
Cross Mod. Yep.
Thank you.
They're really cool looking. So, all right.
Thank you,
Thank
Michelle.
you all.
Bye.
Michelle.
Thank you.
Oh, good to see your face. All right, you made my day. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Y'all too.